Let me tell you how I got into the Global Compact and why I think it's got a great contribution to make to the global society today. In 1999, I edited a book called Global Codes of Conduct, an Idea Whose Time Has Come. And my observation then was, in the 1990s, clearly the economy had gone global. And what we were seeing is a major paradigm shift where it was a transnational world, not really an international world. There were great movements going on which were almost out of the control of nation states. One of the companies that I tracked in the 1990s was Nike. As you may recall, Nike was being criticized for running sweatshops and paying slave wages and having their products made in inhuman conditions. Now, Nike's response in the 1990s was, we don't own any of these manufacturing plants that we buy our products for. We're a marketing company. And, of course, that was true. They subcontracted everything out all over the world, mostly in poor developing countries. And they argued, and I think really believed they would carry the day, that they weren't responsible for the way their subcontractors dealt with workers and the wages they paid. Nike was only responsible for what they did as a company. And so they really didn't see, to use the distinction that Gil Marcus made this morning, that there were any norms here that applied to them. And I think they were saying this in quite good conscience. And there were NGOs, both in the US and Europe and in some places in Asia, which mounted tremendous opposition to Nike and said, you are being irresponsible. And this is wrong and unethical for you to be making a fortune and having this product made in dehumanized conditions. And you ought to take some responsibility. Now, finally, with consumer boycotts, with pressure from NGOs around the world, international NGOs, Nike did change their behavior. And to make a long story short, they're one of the model employers in developing countries today. But from a professor's point of view, what we're seeing here is a major paradigm shift. We see a major shift in the way, in the norms that a company is holding for what's ethical, what's right. And in other words, new rules, if you will, not organized by nation states, because what Nike was doing, they didn't cross borders, they transcended borders. This is a real transnational world that we're living in. But Nike's behavior was changed by international NGOs and other organizations. And so it's a good example for a shift that was going on around the world, that the power wasn't vested in nation states. The power was vested in other organizations to move and change the behavior of multinational companies. I think there was a growing realization that world trade and the globalization of the economy clearly was creating wealth, massive amounts of wealth, but it wasn't distributed particularly well, and in many cases it was dehumanizing people. And so I think the Nike case, just to make a long story short, and that's my role, is a symptom of an evolution that's going on, it seems to me, in the global economy. And where we're seeing a massive shift of power out of nations and into other organizations. Now, and that's why I wrote the book the fact that we needed a global code of conduct, because we needed to find a way to gain some consensus on what is right and wrong, to gain some consensus on how to manage a global economy. It was clear that Nike didn't have a good understanding of what the appropriate norms were. And when you look at cases in China and India, which are growing economies, we have the problem in spades. There really isn't a consensus. And the role of a voluntary code, one of the roles, it seems to me, is to educate, is to slowly institutionalize norms, if you will, customary ways of doing things which are considered legitimate and acceptable by people. Now, the alternative, of course, is to have some sort of supranational institution that would control all economies. And that could be arranged if we could get a treaty signed by all major nation states, a treaty which would set up some supranational organization that would have rule-setting power and then power to make sure the rules were followed. But as you can imagine, getting nation states to agree for this overarching power, to renounce their sovereignty, would be impossible. Any of you have studied it. I mean, even in the United States, we've never really got agreement on the International Criminal Court because it's a renunciation of sovereignty. And certainly when you're dealing with these issues, I can't imagine China even thinking about giving up sovereignty on these issues. So at least in our lifetime, it's not feasible to think that nation states are going to renounce sovereignty. So it seemed to me that voluntary codes were the way to go. There was a lot of chance for making some headway. My book came out in 1999. Just as the book was coming out, I read in the paper that Kofi Annan has announced, has spoken about at the World Economic Forum in Davos about the need for some sort of a global set of ideals and norms. He called it a global compact. And a dozen or so companies decided they liked this idea very much and it ought to be housed in the United Nations. And in the year 2000, they launched what's called the United Nations Global Compact. And I'll go in a moment what that consists of. But basically it concerns, as Sir Mark Moody Stewart said this morning, 10 principles which concern 4 key areas: human rights, labor issues, environmental issues, and anti-corruption issues. And I thought this is a good idea because here is a chance to get global norms established. Here's an opportunity to educate the world about what we think is good behavior, good habits for conducting business in the world. And the UN already has an infrastructure. They have offices in every major city in the world. We wouldn't have to start and, open up offices and hire people. The UN already has that. And so, in many countries, they also have legitimacy. They're considered a good organization. And so I volunteered to help get American companies to sign up. We have several meetings at my home university with companies, and a lot of the big U.S. companies have signed up. Hewlett-Packard, Merck, Cisco Systems, DuPont, and Ford. It goes on and on.